21st of March, 2001. It's about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. What was it like growing up in Idaho? Your childhood.
Well, it was fine because I don't know any other place. I never lived anywhere else besides here.
What was it like though?
Well, there wasn't very many people, and the roads were not crowded, and everybody knew everybody. It was a nice place.
What was it like growing up during the Depression?
Well, I didn't really know anything about it, and all of our friends were in the same situation, so we didn't feel like you were deprived because everybody was making their own entertainment, and we didn't feel like you were being put upon or anything.
Did Grandpa Venhelm lose his job or anything like that?
No, he didn't. He had several odd jobs. And he worked for a farmer for $1 a day for quite a little while. And then he got a better job. We moved to town.
And where were you when you went just out of the country?
Mm-hmm. Between Nampa and Colorado.
And then you moved to Nampa.
Mm-hmm.
And so what sort of activities did you do during high school year?
I did a whole lot. I belonged to several little clubs, like the Latin Club, and played in the band, and played in summer band. The pep club for high school.
What did you play in the band? And was that like a pep band? Did you play for the high school games or?
The band did, but I didn't belong to the pep band. I just belonged to the Red River Marching Band.
And like the Latin club, was that you taking Latin classes and stuff like that?
I took 2 years of Latin, and wished afterwards I hadn't. Didn't do much good.
And then Spiz was like a pep
It was
club.
the girls' pep club. And we went to all the ball games and did all that kind of stuff.
So, how did you meet Delbert?
Well, I had seen him at school, and one of my best girlfriends there was a dance coming up, and she says, I'm going to invite him to the dance. And I was ornery, and I got to school first, and I invited him to the dance. Because I just didn't want her to. So that started 55 years. More than that, 58 years.
So you guys went to the dance together?
Mm-hmm. Always, every dance that come along, we went to.
And what was that in school?
Mm-hmm.
Like sophomore, junior?
I would have been a sophomore. No, junior. He was a senior.
And was it early in the year, so you guys went to a lot of dances together?
Mm-hmm.
So what was your wedding like?
It was pretty simple. I think we had probably 150 guests. Anything very elaborate.
It was at the Methodist church.
Mm-hmm. I went to Portland to buy my wedding dress.
And then you had a reception.
Mm-hmm.
How was that?
That was fine. My friends and the church ladies done the reception.
And then for your honeymoon, you went camping.
Yeah.
What'd you think of that?
At the time, I didn't think much of it. Now I think it was a very foolish thing to have done.
Why is that?
Well, it was sort of a one-sided situation. time, I just thought it was just fine.
One-sided as Grandpa wanted to go fishing.
Right. And we probably couldn't have afforded to do anything else, so
It worked out.
it worked out fine.
So during the war, what was it? The home, like Nampa life during the war was the home front, like rationing and saving.
Yeah. We done without a lot of things because you had stamps for meat and butter, and probably the one thing that affected me was you had stamps for buying shoes. You couldn't buy their shoes without a stamp. And there were lots of drives for saving different things for the war effort. There were no tires.
So what did it feel like to have Grandpa go off to war and your brother and loved ones like that? How did that make you feel?
Well, there again, I think being young, I didn't realize the situation as much as I would have now. The seriousness of it now. You missed them, and I missed Delbert a lot, but I really don't think I gave it a thought that he wouldn't come back or anything. I was just too young.
And you were around like 17,
Like 18, maybe
and Grandpa was gone for 2
2 years.
2 years. So tell me about getting letters from Grandpa.
Well, here again, I thought I should get a letter every day. And he wasn't able to send a letter every day. So I would walk home from high school, which was about 17 blocks at noon, or else I'd get another fellow to drive me home because I always wanted to go home and see if there was a letter. But he wrote a lot. It would go quite a while, lots of times without a letter. And during that war, you didn't know where anybody was.
So did he just have, what did he say in the letters?
I love you.
And could he talk about where he was
No.
or anything like that? Or
And
anything
what he
he was
was doing, it was just general. I don't think he could, I couldn't even figure out where he was.
So really vague.
Except I know he went to the coast and left from the west coast. But I don't know even know where they went.
And for the record, those letters got burned.
Yeah, I wish I'd have saved some. But
Get that on tape.
only, yeah, I didn't save any letters for some reason.
So what did it feel like when the war was over? Like when the war was over and Grandpa was coming home and
Yeah.
Uncle Ralph and stuff.
We were really excited, and yet here we didn't have the celebrations like they did in the city. So we just kept waiting and waiting until you would hear from them. There was nothing, I don't remember anything special happening in Denver. You were here, but do you remember anything special?
What?
Have anything special going on?
Except I had to hitchhike home.
Yeah.
Going back, you went to what elementary school up there?
I went to country school and then East Kenwood and then East Side
And then you went to
Central.
Central for junior high and middle school,
Mhm.
and then Nampa High. Were you happy to move into the city when you did
Yes.
in the country?
I think that would be fun.
Why is that?
Well, just more things to do, and you could go by yourself, go to the library, or go places.
So you got married to Delbert, and how was being a housewife? How was raising kids at home?
I really liked it. We had to move a lot because right after the war you couldn't rent places. There was no houses available, no apartments available. So we lived in like 1-room apartments and 2-room apartments, and I was just happy in love. It didn't bother me.
And like, what about like raising kids? Do you have any stories there?
You know, at that time you were just expected to have a family, and the majority of the women stayed home with their children. There were some that went to work, but Dad's mother always worked, and so he didn't want me to work. So I stayed home, cooked and cleaned.
So how, like, you got involved with the Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts through Diane and Dennis? What did you do when you were involved in that?
I was assistant leader for the Girl Scouts, and then a leader, and for several years. And we worked on a camp committee up at McCall for several years.
You was a den mother.
The den mother. Still went through that. And we worked in the church with the youth group.
So would you say you were pretty involved with groups and stuff like that when you were raising?
Yeah, I think so. GPA.
What did you do in the PTA? Just
I was just attended and helped with their fundraisers and things like that.
I was going to ask you about Karen. I don't know anything about it, so I wonder if you could tell me about that.
Well, you never expect anything to happen, and so it was a shock when she was born and had Down syndrome. And at that time, there's nothing to do for it, but the attitude of people and everything was really different. And our doctor suggested that we place her in the state school, but can't remember, but they would not take her because of us or something. If we had not been qualified people to take care of her, they would have taken her, but they thought that we could do that. And it proved to be good that we brought her home.
So you did try at first to bring her to the state school?
Yeah, well, yeah, and like say the doctor was the one that sort of influenced us to try to place her there. So, but I think it was a good thing that we didn't. And she lived to be 9 months old. Was not healthy any of that time.
Then I'm going to ask you about, like, after that, I knew you, like, helped was a lunch lady at the schools and stuff. Like, did you start that as Dad was getting older and not
Yes.
needing?
I probably kind of went there when Diane was going to go to college and to help out. And so then I was there about 3 or 4 years. That's all I worked there.
And what other jobs did you have after?
And then I worked later, quite a bit later, went to the children's shop at the mall and worked there for about 2 years till they closed the shop. Then I worked for a gift shop a little while, but not very long. Probably a year at the gift shop.
And then you retired.
Then I retired. It was fall.
That's all.
sounds like enough.
This is Delbert Parry, the 21st of March 2001, probably 30. What was it like growing up in Utah?
Well, I grew up in the city of Ogden City, and my friends there, and then we moved out on a fruit orchard between Ogden and Salt Lake, and where I lived before I moved up here.
And why did you move to Idaho?
Well, my father had worked with the Amalgamated Sugar Company, and when they put the new factory up here, they transferred him up here with the Amalgamated Sugar Company.
So he just got transferred to.
It's got transferred from the Ogden mill to this mill here. And there's a little story of that too. They built this mill in 1940 and 41, and the war broke out, and they canceled all the machinery, and they couldn't get any machinery, so they had to decide whether to not open this mill or close the Ogden mill. And they closed the Ogden mill and moved all the machinery up here to this, here and there.
And so didn't he install all the
He
machinery?
helped install the machinery and then worked there, but he worked at the Ogden mill since he was 18 years old, off and on.
And how old were you when you moved to Idaho?
I think I was 14 or 15. Probably 15, I guess.
So how did the move affect you when you moved?
Well, I didn't really want to move at the time. But after moving up here and met a lot of friends and everything, I really enjoyed it.
When did you start skiing at that time? I mean,
I skied clear back in about 1939 and 40, but, down in Ogden, and they just had a rope tow at what's called Snow Basin. And then I moved up here and I skied just a little bit. And I got hurt at McCall, and I was in the floor covering business then and had a child and damaged my knee, and I thought I better not damage more, so I quit skiing. I did ski for several years.
what was it like growing up during the Depression in Utah?
The Depression, most of our friends were in the same boat we were at. We knew we was going without things, but it never bothered us because everybody was treated about the same. So it wasn't like you had poverty here and rich people there. Everybody was pretty well the same boat that you run around with. The kids you run around with were just about the same boat you were in.
Did Grandpa Parry lose his job at Amalgamated Sugar?
Yes, he received sugar, when they make sugar, they call it campaign, just when they're processing the beets. And then he'd get laid off several times and he'd get called back. He started with him when he was about 18 years old, but he off and on he lost his job and temporary layoff, and then he'd get hired back. He shoveled snow in the Ogden, streets of Ogden for 25 cents an hour, and they'll build a canal above Ogden.
Did he build the canal with like the WPA? Or?
Yes, it was a similar like that.
So he was in a government work program when he was with the.
I really don't know if that's the case. I just know he worked on this canal, the Highline Canal.
So when you got up here and then you went to high school, what sort of stuff did you do in high school?
What did I do?
Like clubs and sports and stuff.
I run the photography club, and I belonged to the machinist club, and I was the president of the machinist club. We had the first one, and I was probably the only two clubs I actually belonged to in high school.
And didn't the machinist club for parties could you not go outside of Nampa?
Right.
So how did you get around that?
Well, I went in there and talked to the principal, and they said, no, we can't having outside activities out of town, and I suggested that we were going to invite him to be the honored guest, and he said, well, maybe we can work it out, and so we got to go out of town because we invited the principal to be our honored guest,
And you went to Boise.
and we went to Boise.
Grandma also said you chased women in high school. Is that true?
Well, I don't believe that.
So how did you meet Grandma?
Well, had gone with 2 or 3 other girls, not really going with them, just dates. And one day in school, she come running up to me and invited me to go to a dance. And I said, yeah, I'll go with you. And that's how I ended up going with her.
So Grandma initiated that.
And Grandma initiated that. Absolutely.
So what was your wedding like for you?
Oh, I guess it's like anybody else's wedding. I really enjoyed it. It was a nice wedding. I just really enjoyed it.
What did you think of the honeymoon?
Well, I took Grandma up to the Warm Lake, and we rented a cabin and met some friends up there and went salmon fishing, and just had a great time.
Did Grandma go fishing with you?
Oh, she went with me, but she didn't do any fishing.
So the war broke out, and why did you decide to join the Navy?
Several of my friends went to the Navy that was older, and my brother joined the Navy a year before I did, and so I just wanted to join the Navy. My mother had to go sign for me because I joined when I was 17 years old, and you had to be anything under 18, you had to have parents' consent. And had I waited until I was 18, I could have been drafted in the Army, and I wanted to go in the Navy. So.
Was Great-Grandma Parry apprehensive about letting you join the Navy?
Yeah, very much. She already had one boy in the service, and then they had both the kids off the war. It was pretty dramatic for them, I'm sure.
How did you talk her into signing for it?
Just the fact that I wanted to go in the Navy, and she just willingly accepted it and let me go.
You had to go in the service, so you didn't have, you had to go in the service, so there was no choice.
Well, that's what I say. If you waited to be 18, I would have been drafted, and chances are I would have got to go in the Navy.
And did Uncle Ralph get drafted, or did
He got drafted in the Army.
So what were some experiences at boot camp in Fairfield?
Well, boot camp is it's a tough deal. You get hollered at and shouted at, and there's nothing but a bunch of dummies all the time you're there, and your commanding officer never seen such a bunch of misfits in his life and everything, and they just keep drilling this into you that you're worthless, no good, and everything, just get you fighting mad, and then when we graduated, we were one of the best companies we ever had, and we found out this is where they work up there.
So you went off, and where did you go?
When I left Farragut, they put me on a troop train, and sent me to Treasure Island in San Francisco. And then I was put on a ship's company for a destroyer, and had to have physical and firefighting school and all that. And then they took me off that destroyer company and put me on another one, and I had to go through all this firefighting schools and target training and marksmanship and everything. And they took me off that, and this was just a few weeks going by, and then they put me on the cruiser and detail, and next thing you know, then I went to out to sea in a cruiser.
And so you originally were going to be on a destroyer, and then
I was put on 2 destroyer companies, but never on the ship.
Right.
And then I was put on the cruiser, and that's how I got on the sea.
And you tested pretty well in marksmanship.
Yes.
And so then through that you got stationed where on the cruiser?
That really had nothing to do with it. They just put you where they needed you, and I have a little story to tell about that too. I went over there for an interview, and I wanted to be a machinist mate because of my machinist training in high school, and I had several hundred hours in machine shop from the high school, and I had a certificate showing in there. So I told the fellow that he wondered what I wanted to do, and I told him to be a machinist mate. He said, "Oh." So he hollered at another fellow and said, "I got a guy here who wants to be a machinist mate. What do you think?" "Yeah." He said, "He can be a machinist mate. Put him in the F division." So I got back aboard ship and the company in Treasure Island. The fellow said, "Well, what did you get?" So I got just what I wanted. I'm going to be a machinist mate. He said, "Oh, what division?" And I said, "The F division." He said, "Yeah, I'm so-and-so, the F division, that's fire control and gunner's mate." So I ended up being a gunner's mate and worked my way up from small arms and to in the armory up to 20 millimeter, 40 millimeter, and then 5-inch guns. And I ended up being on the upper handling room of the 5-inch gun.
And you had some boots during the war. What was that about? The boots that you had sent to you?
Oh, I had my feet, flat feet. My feet bothered me on them steel decks, and I had a pair of logger boots that my mother that I'd owned when I was working here before I went to service. So I had my mother send them to me. Well, just a size package to get them. They could only send so much, so she had to put them in 2 different packages. And when I received them, I received 1 shoe, 1 boot, and 3 weeks later, they only got mail about every 3 weeks. Then I got the other boot. And I just had put them on, and I just worn them just a little bit, and I went up one of the ladders one day, and the lieutenant, junior grade, seen me and hollered at me and wondered where I got them boots, and I told him that they were sent to me from home, and he says, "Come here." And we went over there, and he said, "You take them boots off, and let's throw them over the side." That's what I did. A pair of nice new logger boots went over the side, because they weren't military issues. And I waited several weeks to get them.
Also, like with your high grades in the marksmanship, you got to teach classes and you got a pass.
Yes, and it really had nothing to do with marksman, but from my mechanical ability, I was put in a deal called machine gun repair, and it's a little repair shop where they brought 20 millimeter machine guns up for repair. And I had to give lessons on how to repair and also give tools. We had, the guys aboard ship that didn't know the difference between a hacksaw and a hammer and a chisel and a screwdriver, and so I give lessons on that. And this went on for like about 6 weeks, and so they give me the fellow in charge, the lieutenant, give me a early chow pass. And I was supposed to turn that in at the end of my 6 weeks, which I never did. And all the time I was aboard ship, I could go down to the head of the line if I wanted to and show my early chow pass and not have to wait in line to get my food. But I still got that pass up there.
When you were in gunnery or the gunnery mate, what was some experiences with combat?
Well, at the end of we was at the end of the war, and the kamikaze pilots were flying almost every day, and we was in constant firing at kamikaze planes. And we were just lucky we was just never hit by them.
So you did shoot down planes though?
We shot at planes. You never know just who was shooting them down because different ships were shooting at them. So. And they tell them when they fly, but we was there, and the kamikazes were attacking us, and we went on shore bombardment of Japan, and so we was shooting at shells over Japan and
at the mainland?
Yeah, at the mainland. Carrier or destroyer is what they call it. What they call a ship that screens for aircraft carriers, and it protects the aircraft carrier from taking planes coming at them, because if they hit the decker and thing, then you can't land the airplane. So that's what the cruiser does. And I might also add that every day, almost every day, you'd see one of your pilots coming back from the deal, and not one but several. And if the plane landed on the carrier deck and was damaged, the pilot jumped out and immediately the plane was pushed over the side. It was not safe because they had to get it out of the way, and they had tractors and small tractors, and then they just push them over the side. And then the planes that crashed in the ocean, you just waited and waited for that fellow to bob up out of there, and then very big bob up there, and the pilot and little one-man raft. And then we'd go pick destroyers, pick them up and take them back to take a break formation and take them back to the carrier. And something's interesting there. They paid the destroyer off in ice cream.
If you picked them up?
If they picked them up, and depending on how high the officer was, the pilot, was how much ice cream they got and how much heat up they got. So they didn't have ice cream making facilities aboard the destroyer. We did on the cruise.
And the name of your cruiser was the USS Tucson.
Yes, named after Tucson, Arizona.
And your cruiser was one of the surrounding ships during the surrender.
Yes.
What was that like?
Well, we went into Tokyo Bay when the war ended, and was anchored there, and then we went ashore, and I've been in the gunnery department. I was chosen to be one of the first to go ashore from our ship. They took several from each ship, and not several, but a dozen or so. And I happened to be on one of the first boarding parties to go to Japan, and they was just carrying pistols with us, and didn't know what we were going to get into, and we got over there, and people were really polite and humble, and glad it was over and everything. And they were pretty bad shape there in Tokyo.
So what was that? I mean, what was that like? What did it look like? Tokyo?
Well, it just had a lot of bombing, and planes had crashed, and people living in these downed aircraft and everything. And they were in pretty bad shape when the war ended. All the shore bombing.
And what were you expected to do when you were in Japan?
Just went over there to secure and make sure that the war was over with them, and it was, and we didn't know what we were going to get into, and as it turned out to be, they was very even bowing to us and everything, and they got over not the military people, but the civilians, the elderly ladies and everything. It was pretty bad. Then I got to watch we was tied up with the Missouri, not alongside, but anchored out in Tokyo Bay with the Missouri, and I got to watch the signing of the peace treaty.
Binoculars?
Yes, through binoculars in my ship.
And you were telling me once of like a mission that your captain said that you guys would give him accommodation for. What was
Well, we had a top secret mission, and we went into the Philippines, the Leyte Gulf in the Philippines, and while we were in there, our captain volunteered for a special assignment we knew nothing about, but they brought a lot of radio equipment aboard and a lot of radio men aboard, and we didn't know why, and it was all top secret. And they didn't tell us till we got out to sea. And what our captain had done is decided we'd be a decoy and try to bring the Japanese Air Force out to us while our ships, the Third Fleet, went in and bombarded Japan. And what happened, they set up in the officer's wardroom, they set up all this radio equipment, and then brought all these radio men aboard. And they would talk back and forth to one another of what ship. It was like they were talking from one ship to another ship. And they did that. We was out there for 24 hours. And to alert the Japanese Navy to us. And that one night I was standing and then watch up on the open bridge, and it was midnight to 4 in the morning, and it was, they're just droning with airplanes, and it was the Japanese Air Force looking for us, and they never found us. If they found us, I wouldn't be here today to tell that story, and that's what it was a top secret, and it's not even recorded, and in our, I got ship's log, from the ship's log, and it just says it's steaming singularly. It wasn't even recorded what we were doing even during the war.
And so it worked. I mean, you lured the Japanese aircraft out there, but they didn't. I mean, it worked, but they didn't succeed.
They didn't find us.
Yeah.
And while they were out after looking for see, they thought it was the fleet. It wasn't just us. So by these radio men talking back and forth, they picked it up. The Japanese picked it up, and they thought it was a whole fleet out there. Because I might talk to you and have a code of a certain ship, and you'd be talking to this fellow here and that fellow there, and they just constantly talking back and forth. So the Japanese listening in thought that it was a whole fleet, the whole fleet was there. Well, they were looking for us. Then the fleet went in, and that's the first shore bombardment in Japan.
What was it like when you went on leave when you got a Liberty?
Oh, the Liberties were always a lot of fun. Just fun to get away and do things, go to shows or go to plays, do whatever you wanted to do.
So what were some experiences with that? I mean, what kind of shows and what kind of?
Well, I just like when I was down in San Pedro, we went into Hollywood and went into NBC and seen some radio programs. And seen the first radio program that Red Skelton did after the war was over, and Liberties was just what they say, went to USO clubs and had some dances and had plays and things like that.
Didn't you once get on like an English ship?
Yes, I went on English ships, and I just might tell you that we call them lineys, and they're very dirty ships, and the Russian ships were very dirty too.
Did you get on a Russian ship?
Yes.
Didn't you drink with them, or didn't they have a time where they could drink?
Yeah, at 4 o'clock every day they had their can't remember what to call it now, but they have a drink every 3 or 4 o'clock every day. That's part of the ritual, the English ship.
And you were on the ship once on Liberty and drank with the English?
Yeah.
So after the war, what was it like? Like, how did you get home? And
well, we came back from overseas, and we stopped at Pearl Harbor, and we were supposed to have some repairs done. And by the way, we picked up prisoner of war and brought the ones that went in really bad shape and put them on our ship and brought them home. And then we landed in San Francisco in October 1945. The war ended in August. We was in Tokyo Bay in September. Left the 20th of September to come home, and got in San Francisco in October. And there was a kid down there selling newspapers, and I got a newspaper from him, and they were having a big bus strike and everything. So I got on the streetcar. I had first leave, not Liberty, off the ship. And so I had a Japanese rifle that I have in my duffel bag, and I threw it on my shoulder and got on the streetcar and went as far inland as it went. And then I got out on the highway and hitchhiked to Reno, and got right to Reno, and then I got right from Reno and got right here in Memphis. So,
how did you come across the Japanese rifle? Was that when you were on the
I went ashore in Japan, and I really don't remember how I acquired the rifle, because they just were in souvenir things, like some of the stuff you see up there. It's just Japanese souvenirs.
And so you got home, and And you walked home and you walked inside, and what was that like?
Walked inside.
Yeah.
What do you mean walked?
When you got home, what was that like?
Well, it was, my folks went home yet, and Fern didn't know I was home, and I just remember going in my folks' house, and they had the stuff up on whatnot shelves and everything, and I took it off because I knew it was going to fall off, because aboard ship you don't have anything like that.
But no one was home when you
Nobody
came.
was home when I got home.
How did that make you feel?
Well, I don't know, it didn't bother me, they were working.
So you got home after the war, and you married Fern, and what jobs did you have?
Well, before I went into service, I worked for a furniture store and started learning the molding trade. And after the war, and I worked for Standard Furniture and learned the furniture business and also the floor covering trade.
Didn't you go to Ogden to go to a school to learn how to?
I went to Salt Lake and learned how to refinish furniture at the refinishing school.
And how long was that?
I don't know, probably a week or all. I don't think it's longer than that, was it? Wasn't very long.
And then after Standard Furniture,
Then I went to work for Taylor and Sons, and Standard Furniture in Nampa went out of business here and moved to Boise. And then Taylor and Sons, that's Taylor died in the meantime, but he's the one that taught me the molding trade for women in service. And so I went to work for Taylor and Sons.
and they were a floor covering business.
They were floor covering. And I quit them and went and started my own floor covering business. And I had that for like 12 years. And then I quit that and went to work for a fellow building houses, and then I went back in and went building houses.
So why did you quit your floor covering business?
Because my knees and my back had given out on me. It's hard on the knees and back.
And then you went, you worked building houses, and then you started your own contracting business.
Right.
And why did you stop that?
That was in the 60s, and here in Nampa, the market just fell off, and there was no how the economy was so bad, there was no houses being built or anything like that. So then I had a chance to go out here to a trailer factory that was building units for the Vietnam War and hospitals for Japan, and I worked for them for 4 years.
And then when did you go to work for
Meridian Wood. Well, the company, it was an English, Canadian company that I was working for, and they was going to, after the Vietnam War ended, that they was going to move back to Canada. And the owner one day down from Canada and told me I had a chance to go there, and I didn't want to, and
up to Canada.
And if he just suggested that if I found a job, I better take it. So that's when I went to Meridian Wood.
And what did you do there?
When I first went there, I put me in charge of construction of some new buildings, they was building, and that's what I did. And then when I got all that, then they put me through the plant, learning different parts of the business. And then one day they called me and wanted me to take over the purchasing.
And then you did that until?
I did that for several years. And then they went bankrupt here in Nampa, and still had a plant up in Baker, Oregon. And then I left there and went to down to Dodge and sold cars at Dodge Motor.
And then you went to, when did you go to Amalgamated Sugar?
That was, what year was that? That was another strange
That was
thing.
96 or 86, because you only worked there a year. They
Dodge, they went out of
Went
business.
out of
They sold the
business.
business, and so then I went to the sugar factory. So I
yeah.
had several places that closed down after I went to work for them.
So you have bad luck.
Bad luck.
Then he retired in 89.
Huh?
Then he retired in 89.
When did you, You went to Alaska to work for a while too.
Yes, that was in 1968.
Where was that in relation with everything?
Well, when this company I worked for that built units for overseas, we was the largest builder of relocatable housing in the world. There was a company down in Texas that was bigger, but this was a Canadian company, and we built schoolhouses, and we built units for not schoolhouses, but school buildings that they modularly they put all together, classrooms, and then we had when I was up in Canada, they had a fleet of units that were what's called out in the bush. They were out there, in Alaska, they call it the bush. It was an oil exploration, and I had to go up and bring all these units out of the bush and remodel them, get them back in shape, and rent them out again. And I was up there 5 months in Anchorage, Alaska.
And all at one time.
All at one time. And then I had in Cook Inlet, they had several offshore oil drilling rigs, and I had to go out there several times and repair windows and stuff out there on these oil drilling rigs that built, and the company wanted me to go out and do that.
And then you also went to some island.
Yes, the company also, we put 191 trailers on Kwajalein Island, which is down near New Guinea and New Zealand, and they sent me there. The company, they were having trouble. The company that was erecting them and putting them together was having trouble, and they was fighting with the Corps of Engineers. So they sent me over there to see if I could straighten it out. What the problem was.
You get it straightened out.
I got it straightened out, and the other time they sent me back to New York, to New Jersey. We built 40 some units for Iran, and the railroad damaged them, and they sent me back there to rebuild these units in New Jersey. And I was back there 3 weeks rebuilding these units before the government got them bought out. And I collected on that job. I collected about $125,000 damage back there. So, in the railroad.
So, in the meantime, what did it feel like having kids? Like, what were some experiences with?
Oh, I just really enjoyed the kids. When Diane was little, I used to take her to shows, her and I go to shows, do a lot of things together. And then Dennis came along, and we just got active in scouting and Cub Scouting and hunting and camping, hunting and fishing. And
You're also very active in the Girl Scouts too.
very active in Girl Scouts. In fact, I was a registered Girl Scout for several years.
So, like, what do you have any experiences with the Boy Scouts or the Girl Scouts, and like?
Not anything special, just really enjoyed the kids and taking them out and being with them and doing things with them. Just,
And what were your experiences with Karen? With Karen's life?
well, she was kind of special to me, and we just she was a sickly little child, and it was just took a lot of attention, a lot of holding her and stuff like that, and I really enjoyed just having her, and I'm so glad that we never put her in an institution because the enjoyment we got out of it. But she was just something special.
And I was going to ask you why did you join the Methodist Church after 50 years of being a visitor?
Well, I was active. Years ago, back way down when the kids first was born, I did a lot of hunting and fishing. I worked 6 days a week, so Sundays I'd go fishing or hunting, and so when the kids were coming along, Fern said, if you're not going to stay and take them to church, I will. So that's the reason our kids were brought up in the Methodist church. Well, then after I got a little older, they got a little older, and I started going down to church with them. So I was a very active non-member of the Methodist church for over 50 years. Back when I joined the Methodist church, a lot of people just couldn't believe that I wasn't already a member of the Methodist church.
And now when you're retired, you spend a lot of your time going skiing and golfing and volunteering. How does it feel to volunteer with Grandma doing things?
Well, I just how did you mean volunteering with her helping, or
with you and with Grandma and you and yourself? And
well, I guess just something I enjoy doing, and several things that Grandma and I have done together as volunteering, and then I've got involved in probably more things than I should get involved in. But that's why over there, you look over there, it said volunteer of the century. The Chamber of Commerce gave me that, so that's why I did a lot of volunteering. I've been very active in the Buckaroo Breakfast here. In fact, this is my 32nd year with the Buckaroo Breakfast. Now they call it Griddles for Fiddles.
which is so. I think we're done.